Hello and welcome to this installment of the Good Old Days audio collection. This is Ken Tate, editor of Good Old Days magazine, and your host for this look back to those days gone by. In this special collection of memories, we'll look back at Christmas and winter times in those magical days of our childhood. Come back with me and share these precious memories of a time we know affectionately as the good old days. Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. Those were the only words I had to memorize for the school's Christmas pageant. 25 simple words from the Gospel according to St. Matthew. All I had to do was lead the 3 kings of the east up to Herod and say those 25 words. Then it was off to the manger with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, our gifts for the newborn king. I knew how important it was to get it right. Mrs. Simmons, my 3rd grade teacher and the director, had emphasized that to all of us elementary students who were saddled with speaking parts. All of our parents would be there, along with a lot of important people, like school board members and county officials. Just 25 simple words. I could do that. "Where is he that is born King of the Jews?" I queried Mama over the dinner dishes. She washed. I dried. "What? Oh, your lines for the pageant," Mama said. She was always pretty quick on such things. "For we saw his star in the east." "You mean, for we have seen his star in the east." She also was pretty quick to catch and correct a 9-year-old's mistakes. "Oh, shoot! For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him." Mama smiled and nodded. Dishes were clean, and so was my delivery. The next few days were spent addressing the same query to every critter on the farm, every fence post, every person who dared show his or her face. "Where is he that is born King of the Jews?" By Friday, the last day of school before Christmas break, I had the lines down perfectly. The night of the pageant was suddenly upon us. The event was scheduled for the local non-denominational church, which at least had a small raised platform to serve as a stage. In the adjacent Sunday school rooms, a bunch of nervous kids gathered to put on primitive costumes and make final preparations. "Where is he that is born King of the Jews?" I asked Joseph, a 4th grader. "Shut up," was his only response. Finally, we were ready. The Christ child was in the manger, surrounded by angels and shepherds. We 3 kings came to Herod, and I intoned my lines. All that week's fretting, and it was over in a matter of a few seconds. What was not over in a few seconds, however, was the memory. And that memory, and many more like it, were what made Christmas in schools back then so special. School-time Yuletides were some of the best times back in the good old days. Christmas experiences had a way of cementing bonds between far-flung families. Back in the 1920s, a trunk that accompanied a special aunt became the basis of just such a bond. Eleanor Vance Koren remembers when her Aunt Ella pulled Yuletide magic from her Christmas trunk.
In the early 20s, Aunt Ella, Mama's only sister, always paid us a visit around Christmas. She wasn't married yet, so Mama's 3 little girls and 1 boy took the place of her own at that time. I remember how Papa complained when they received a letter from her saying her train would arrive at the town depot at a certain time on a certain day. He said, "I sure hope she doesn't bring that old trunk with her again. I hurt my back last time getting it up that stairway to her room. Did you tell her about that, Lucy?" We all looked at Mama, afraid she had told her not to fill it so full if she brought it. Even though our hired man, Jay, always helped Papa carry it in, it still was a strain on both men. Jay never complained. He was a little retarded and very proud of his strength. All three of us girls had our faces pressed close to the window when they returned from the depot, straining our eyes to see if the old trunk was in the back of the horse-driven wagon. Aunt Ella bustled in, all smiles, with a cheery greeting. She hugged each of us and said how we had grown. She wore long dresses and coats, with fur wrapped around her shoulders, a pretty hat perched on top of her heavy black hair that was worn in a pompadour style, held up by large celluloid hairpins with a few pretty curved combs tucked around it. Aunt Ella was the head waitress in a large hotel in a large city and always dressed in the latest style. As soon as the horses were put away for the night, we heard Jay and Papa struggling with the old trunk. Papa was cursing in low tones, and Mama had a happy but worried look on her face. Aunt Ella never seemed to mind Papa. Mama waited supper in the old range stove, so as soon as the trunk was safely upstairs, we sat down to eat. Aunt Ella amused us with stories of the big city and the hotel where she worked. She talked with an Irish brogue because her father had come from Ireland and raised her and several brothers after their mother died. My mother was raised by a family in another area because her father felt she needed a woman's care as she was very young when her mother died. The people who raised her must have taught her to speak the way they did because she didn't have the Irish brogue like her brothers and sisters. Mama and Aunt Ella sat up late after the rest of us were in bed, talking and laughing while they sipped tea. It seems they were trying to make up for lost time and the years they had missed growing up. The next morning, after the dishes were done and Papa and Jay were out in the barn doing chores, we all sat around and waited for Aunt Ella to suggest opening her trunk. When she noticed our anxious faces, she said, "Well now, let's go upstairs and open my trunk, because we might just find something in it for each of you darlings." It was hard not to scramble upstairs ahead of Mama and Aunt Ella, but we knew we shouldn't enter her room without her asking us in. After we were inside, we sat on the side of the bed all excited and waited for the lid of the magic trunk to be opened. There was something pretty for Mama on top. She exclaimed, "Oh, Ella, you shouldn't spend your hard-earned money on us." Aunt Ella answered, "Sure and begorra, if I can't spend some of it on my favorite family, what good is it?" We appreciated those presents so much because the only gifts we received throughout the year were a homemade dress for our birthday and another for Christmas, plus a doll from Santa and a stocking full of nuts and candy. The most memorable Christmas was when Aunt Ella wrote to my mother and told her not to buy dolls for us girls for Christmas because she had already bought us some. Of course, we always thought Santa brought us the dolls. We received those beautiful dolls under the tree Christmas morning. I loved my doll so much that I carried it around with me most of the time. Christmas for me was a doll. Without one, my Christmas would have been very disappointing, no matter what else I might have received. A few nights after Christmas, my folks had to make a trip into town. Aunt Ella stayed with us. My younger sister and I were giving our dolls a ride around the table when my sister reversed her doll and our dolls' heads crashed. My doll's head broke into several pieces. My whole world crumbled. I had looked forward to a doll for many months because no matter how carefully I cared for my doll, one of my younger sisters or brother would break it. I always knew I would get another from Santa if I was a good girl, so I tried to be as good as I could so Santa wouldn't disappoint me. When Aunt Ella saw how devastated I was, she took me by the hand and walked me upstairs. I thought she was going to get me ready for bed, but she took me to her room and opened her trunk. She reached way down in the bottom and pulled out another doll. It wasn't as pretty as the other one, but I clutched it to my chest and looked up at her like she was a fairy godmother. I think she really looked like one to me. She told my mother later that I looked up at her with such an adoring look that it made her feel like a fairy godmother, and it really made her Christmas that year. I heard a few years later that she had bought 3 dolls for us girls, and then saw 3 more, much prettier ones on sale, so decided to put the first ones in the bottom of her trunk for her brother's girls, whom she would be visiting after leaving our house. When I broke mine, she couldn't stand seeing the heartbreak in my eyes, so decided to give me another one. From that night on, there was always a special bond between Aunt Ella and me. Years later, when she was in her 60s, as I am now, she asked me if I remembered the night when I broke my doll and she found another one for me in her old trunk. I said, yes, I remember it very clearly. It was one of the happiest Christmases I ever had, and I think I loved that old trunk and you ever since.
Many stories have been told about Christmas shopping, but what about the story from the other side of the counter? Eugene Atlas helped his parents make a go of their general store and made out pretty good at Christmas as a result. Here is Eugene's story of Christmas in our store.
Christmas season divided our town into two groups: the stores, like B. Atlas Dry Goods, and the buyers of presents. The Christmas season, for those who bought presents, started right after Thanksgiving. But the season for our store started in May, when the wholesale salesmen brought their holiday samples and catalogs to our store. The most important part of ordering for Christmas for the three Atlas sons was ordering toys. That was the only time of year our store carried toys. Mom was more interested in the more profitable fancy clothing and accessories, but she let us boys influence her selection of neckties and toys. When the salesman spread his entire selection of neckties in front of Mom, Wren and I enthusiastically chose our favorites. Ted thought our taste was ridiculous and stayed away. Maybe we selected the more vibrant colors because we understood that the families of our working men preferred them. Or maybe these colors also represented our taste. Every year, we brothers insisted that Mom make the appointment with the toy salesman after school hours, so that we could pick and choose the toys we liked best, for the store, of course. The salesman liked our being there, for we boys wanted almost everything shown to us. What excitement for young boys, picking and choosing, and convincing our mother that this toy and that game would sell like mad at Christmas time 7 months later. It turned out that we were right, maybe not because our choices were so good, but rather because we used the same enthusiasm to sell the toys to our customers that we had used to sell them to our mother. By Thanksgiving, cases and cases of toys filled every corner of our meager living space in the back of the store. We knew that to open even one case before we had created space for the toys in our already overcrowded dry goods store would be to invite disaster. So we only peeked into a few, just to check the merchandise. Thanksgiving dinner was always delicious, but somewhat hurried by our happy anticipation of the evening's work. That night we were going to start clearing space in the store to properly display our toys. The men's pants were moved from the rear left counter onto shipping boxes in front of the table where we ate our meals. This created a problem for eating, and more important, for finding the right size and type of pants for a customer. But the toy brigade had to be served. Finally came the big hour to open all the cartons of toys and display them on that inadequate counter. Our honor was at stake. We had to display all the toys, and we had to sell them. And that is just what we boys did. The store was never decorated with Christmas lights, but it shone and glittered as at no other time. Maybe it was because we took down all the ordinary, commonplace clothing that had festooned the entire store. After hanging there for almost a full year, it had become drab and dusty. In its place we hung the fanciest, the most colorful, and most garish items from our new holiday stock. No wonder the place glittered. The joy of the Christmas season rose above all the buying and selling of gifts. The spirit of gladness was pervasive in everyone. Many of the adults in our town had been born in Poland or Italy, where religious observances were taken very seriously. Everyone wished us a Merry Christmas and meant it, even though they knew we were Jewish, and we equally sincere wished them the same. Eventually, 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve arrived. The mad rush was almost over. We three young salesmen, exhausted but exhilarated, were soon upstairs to bed with an unnecessary reminder to hang our stockings. We gave a last loving look at the remaining disorganized toys, crossed our fingers, and hopefully went upstairs to bed. We hung our stockings Christmas Eve, knowing we were Jewish and Christmas was not part of our tradition, but we were so moved by the Christmas spirit that hanging our stockings on Christmas Eve seemed completely natural. We expected them to be filled on Christmas morning, and we expected a dazzling display of toys for us under those stockings. But which toys? Obviously, we were going to get the ones that were left over, but would that include the super special selections we had wanted for ourselves? We knew how important every sale was for the success of the store, so we had to sell, or try to sell, even our favorite toys. Maturity comes fast, working in a family store. We chose the longest, most stretched-out stockings we owned to hang on the mantelpiece in the dining room. In those days, boys wore over-the-knee black ribbed stockings until they were at least 13. We compared, measured, and gauged the capacity of every stocking we owned. The decision made, we hung them and cleared a large space under them for the bonanza that had to be there the next morning. We went to bed feeling no sense of conflict about this holiday tradition, no sense of the absurdity of hanging stockings as if we boys believed in Santa Claus. Christmas morning was classic Norman Rockwell. Our stockings were overfilled, and toys were heaped on the floor beneath. To our amazement, each of us found there the one toy that had been our super-duper choice of all choices. We had gone to bed sure that our favorite toys had been completely sold out. And yet, there they were, our heart's desire, right below our stocking, evidence of the miracle of parental love. The Christmas season was a success for the store and for the 5 members of the Atlas family. The few remaining toys were rapidly sold at any price to make room for the return of the 12-months-a-year staple of men's pants. The few remaining colorful shirts, still hanging, soon gathered dust and faded into the general grayness of the store. Another Christmas had come and gone, and B. Atlas Dry Goods settled down in its normal routine. But the happiness of the Christmas season remained, and still remains.
I wonder if Eugene sold radios in his parents' store. Radio was the main form of entertainment back in the good old days. Here is Alice Faye from the Phill Harris Alice Faye Show of November 7th, 1948, singing "You Were Meant for Me."
You were meant for me. I was meant for you. Nature patterned you, and when she was done, you were all the sweet things rolled up in one. You're like a plain new melody that never lets me free. For I'm content, the angels must have sent you, and they meant you just for me. You were meant for me. I was meant for you. Nature patterned you, and when she was done, you were all the sweet things rolled up in one. You're like a plain melody that never lets me free. For I'm content, the angels must have sent you, and they meant you just for me.
Dorothy Jean Schroeder remembers delightful Christmases spent at her grandmother's log house. It is a picture straight out of a Currier and Ives print. Join Dorothy and me in the sleigh as we head off for Christmas at Grandma's.
When my 2 sisters and I were children, we had something very special, something that only our older brother and a few cousins had. We had a silver-haired grandmother who lived in a picturesque log house, which was nestled on a hill amongst tall evergreen trees. It had a full-length porch in the back where we could sit and look down into the green valley below. On a clear day, Pilchuck Mountain was visible in the distance. We were even luckier than our cousins because we lived on a small farm in that valley, so close that we could see Grandma's log house from our house. Whenever our mother said, "Let's go see Mama," we would quickly put our toys aside. We 3 sisters, Millie, June, and I, loved to walk through the green pastures and up the trail to Grandma's house. It was about a half-mile to the edge of the woods. After we entered the woods, it was a short walk to the base of a wide trail which was shadowed by tall evergreens and padded with pine needles. The trail wasn't very long, but it was quite steep, so steep that if you started running, going back down, you couldn't stop until you reached the bottom. That is, unless you stumbled and fell. I know, because I fell more than once. That didn't cure me of running, but it taught me to be more sure-footed. Most of our aunts, uncles, and cousins gathered at the log house several times a year for special occasions, such as Grandma's birthday and Mother's Day. But Christmas was the most special day of all. Living in the woods, Grandma had her choice of trees to decorate, and when I was a child, her Christmas tree seemed very tall to me. It almost reached the ceiling. Old-fashioned decorations graced its branches, chains made of red and green paper, strings of sparkling tinsel, hand-painted ornamental balls, popcorn, small cellophane dolls and soldiers. These are the things that I recall, and last but not least, candy canes. How I remember the anticipation as we waited for the sound of heavy footsteps on the long front porch. If it was accompanied by the merry jingle of sleigh bells, we knew that Santa had arrived. Santa would enter the living room with a bag of toys slung over his back and a jolly ho, ho, ho. Now, this was a real storybook Santa, wearing a red suit and cap trimmed with white fur. He also had the classic long white beard, bushy white eyebrows, and a well-rounded tummy. What a thrill it was for those innocents among us who still believed in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy to see him coming through that door. Some of my aunts greeted Santa as if he were an old friend, asking about his trip from the North Pole, that sort of thing. And I still remember how my Aunt Daisy giggled at the time. But Santa was a busy man, so he didn't have time to dally. He put his pack on the floor, reached in for a gift, then called out a name. There was a gift for each of my cousins, my sisters, my brothers, and me, all of the children. I can't recall what the others got, but I usually got a book because Santa seemed to know what I wanted most. Then one Christmas, the unthinkable happened. One of my cousins discovered that Santa Claus was a phony, that the man in the red Santa suit was actually a favorite uncle. And when the innocents argued, the guilty one said she could prove it. She showed us where we could peek into Grandma's bedroom in the corner where the curve of the logs met the straight edge of the wall. What child could resist such a challenge? We girl cousins each took a peek, and sure enough, there he was, stuffing pillows into the red Santa suit. We will never know how the secret of our lost innocence was leaked to those who chose to preserve the fable of Santa Claus, but there may have been younger cousins, as well as my little sister June, who were still believers. I know that the following Christmas, all of us children had to wait together in a small vacant house that was in the same clearing as Grandma's house. We had to wait until just before Santa made his grand entrance. There were a few more Christmas celebrations on the hill before Grandma left her beloved log house and moved down into the valley. Sadly, when she was about 70, walking up the hill to her cabin after going downtown to Machias became too difficult for her. We never realized at the time how much we were blessed. We had a storybook Christmas in a storybook log house. Although it's been more than 50 years since we gathered at Grandma's house for the last time, I still remember the happy days of long ago, and I will always cherish those memories.